Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining and listening in to your pre-work for the Practitioners Working Group on September 12th and 13th in Washington, D.C. This is Molly O'Donnell, who I've met most of you, a manager on the Reimagine Learning Fund. And I'm here with my colleagues from America Forward and from the Penn Hill Group to give a bit of a rundown about what we're going to be doing together in our time on the 12th and the 13th, and also share a little bit of a state of play of where things are, so you walk in really prepared to engage on the 12th and the 13th. I wanted to start by just giving a little bit of an overview of where we've been with the Practitioners Working Group. Many of you have attended, some of you will be new to attending. This will be the third year we've come together, and this was emerged really out of a response to a request from you and your organizations that sometimes it's really hard, the challenges you're wrestling with, and alone in an organization, you'd like to come together and work collaboratively with others and think about, some of those key challenges together. So we started the Practitioners Working Group in 2015, and if you all want to go to the next slide or a few slides ahead, we started in 2015 really thinking about, as a group together, what does it mean for us to build capacity to serve complex learners? How do we shape our organizations? How do we learn more together to really serve a group of students who have been underserved by our education system? And how can we do that as a group of people who are a part of the Reimagine Learning Collaborative? In 2016, last year, we came together in Boston and we really focused on, the beat goes on, social innovation through collaboration. What does it look like to have effective partnership strategies? We know no organization can drive change alone. So what does it mean to actually partner effectively, and how do you do that in a strategic way as an organization? This year in 2017, our focus is on policy. So our session this year is called A Seat at the Table from Social to Systems Entrepreneurship. Now, over the years, we've heard from a number of you that you'd like to learn how to leverage your direct impact models to more effectively influence public policy. We had a chance to do this a little bit as a community with the ESSA legislation and the Hill Day in 2015. And in recent months and over the past year, a lot of organizations have been saying, how do we actually respond to the implementation of ESSA? And how do we also respond to the shifting seas at the federal level in the policy context? So we wanted to take the opportunity this fall to really focus on policy. And we know that policy is a huge lever for you to go from being a social entrepreneur to a systems entrepreneur, and really use policy to fundamentally shift the ways in which the system supports students. So that's our path in the Practitioners Working Group. We're thrilled to bring you all together in DC. And with that, I want to turn it over to Sarah Groh, my colleague from the America Forward team, to kick us off on today's webinar.
Great, thank you so much, Molly. I'm sitting here with the America Forward team and the Penn Hill Group in Washington, D.C., and we are so thrilled to have you all here on September 12th and 13th. So as Molly mentioned, as we look ahead to this year's Practitioners Working Group, we want to provide a bit of background and context that you all can bring into the room as we dig in together for 2 days of learning and action. So as you may know, America Forward is the policy arm of New Profit. We partner really closely with our colleagues on the Reimagine Learning team, and we work with a coalition of organizations, including many of yours, to advocate for innovative bipartisan policy solutions. As Molly highlighted in the lead up to this event, we've held a number of input calls. We've been listening to the deal partners and members of the Reimagine Learning team, and there's been a resounding interest in figuring out how to engage in policy work in strategic ways that support your program delivery and also create the systems change that we know we need to better serve our most vulnerable learners. So in this political climate, that means a few things from where we sit. That means telling clear and compelling stories, engaging in state and local level policy work, and last but definitely not least, maintaining critical engagement at the federal level to both protect key funding streams and advocate for key policies. We're titling our time together in September A Place at the Table because we believe that it's incredibly important for your organizations to be at the table in these conversations. So I'll walk through a few of our key objectives as we kick off here our time together today. So on the 12th and 13th, there are 3 learning objectives for our time. First, to build practitioner capacity to engage in ESSA implementation efforts at the state and local level on Reimagine Learning priorities. 2, to train practitioners in the skill of telling their stories of impact to policymaking audiences and deepen their understanding of how federal funding streams impact local efforts. And 3rd, to defend Reimagine Learning relevant federal funding priorities on the Hill directly in meetings with congressional staffers. So today we're going to spend some time walking through a state of play. My colleagues will give you some background around what's going on in the Hill and with key pieces of legislation, and then we'll talk about that prep work that folks will be completing in advance of the Practitioners Working Group. That prep work that you'll receive in this email along with the webinar is due to Molly O'Donnell via email by end of day on September 8th. Great. With that, I'll turn it over to Donica.
Hi, everybody. It's Donica. And, you know, really what we're doing today, the two pieces that Sarah just talked about are to get you ready so we are reminded of where we have been with policy so far, and that we bring the tools to the table at the meeting so we can make the best use of the time when we're all together. And so in order to do that, one of the things we just wanted to remind everyone is that when Reimagine Learning worked on its policy platform and then advocated around ESSA, there were doors open in the policy arena that were very important that can hold up a Reimagine Learning agenda on the ground. So some of those sort of policy wins and outcomes, this is just a quick refresher. It is not everything. It is a series of things, and based on your organization, there may be other things that also were in there, but this is a reminder of how far we've come. So one of the ways is we've opened the door to more pay for success opportunities that can be implemented at the state and local level. A second is that there was definitely a move to the whole child approach. One of the ways that happened is that allowing at least a fifth indicator for success in the accountability systems. That leaves opportunities open for social emotional learning, whole child learning, other indicators, and even just a mindset shift from only reading math to looking at a more comprehensive view of students' needs and strengths. Another area we worked very hard on with you is the competency-based pilot, which has not yet been opened up, but still exists, and states are thinking about if it gets sort of started at the federal level, would they be applying? And that would allow for the whole range of things we talked about competency-based assessments and really getting to a more personalized approach throughout the system. We also worked very hard on the Education, Innovation, and Research Program, or the EIR program that we've talked about, which is the newer version of I3. And that is something that over time, organizations in the Reimagine Learning Network may want to start thinking about applying for in future competitions that come up. Another area is increased flexibility and removing barriers. We talked a lot over the years that accountability and some sort of accountability structure matters, but that we need the kind of flexibility and lack of rigidness in the system so that districts can flourish with their own kind of innovations and supports. And this is an area that I feel like really opened up. So personalized learning is a key hook in the new law. This is something that we've talked about ad nauseum, but also the district turnaround strategies. What are they going to do when a school doesn't meet the accountability system is really wide open at the local level. And so that's an area that, you know, we really want to see a lot of activity on the ground by all of you in trying to help schools really make good use of that flexibility and the funds that come with it. And then another area is enhanced capacity support. So not only is there more language in the law about partnerships and the ability to partner and continuing the efforts to include things like expanded learning time, but also around, you know, we continued the teacher programs and increased the amount of language around professional development and the need for school leadership support. So there's so much in this law that has potential that directly aligns to the Reimagine Learning priorities. And when we do this, we can really celebrate, right? We can say, wow, our efforts from concept and what we know in the field to policy really work. But it matters not at all if nothing happens with that policy. And so we really want to remind you that we see policy as a cycle, and policy only succeeds when implementation succeeds. And then we have to remember too, that implementation is a moment in time. We learn from that implementation, and very quickly after that, people are going to be asking about, well, what's next? What didn't work and what worked and what do we have to change again? it happens in real time faster than it should. We feel like it comes up faster. So if you look, we had the ideas, we had meetings years ago to create those, and the platform, we had the proposal, we had policy adoption, which we just talked about. Now it's like, okay, we're in the cycle where the pink arrow is saying, what is state and local implementation? And soon after that, and during this process, when we get those hooks in state and local implementation, we need you to be documenting and tracking and evaluating what's happening, because that next set of ideas is going to be asked for soon. And then just as a quick reminder, this is, that cycle is how the world works. How we as America Forward and Reimagine Learning work together with New Profit to make that happen is really focusing in on key opportunities for influence. So we help together cultivate priorities and messages, which we've done. We've been leveraging our collective voice, which this effort continues. We've been engaging educators and policymakers, so that Hill Visit previously helped. And then also we've been helping engage at the state and local level. All of that, the more we do that, the more we can drive systems change at all of the levels. I really feel like what we're doing in the September meeting is we're going to be learning how to best leverage all our collective voice and messaging and priorities to engage policymakers and influence them, but also how to help you set up some ideas for what success at the local level in terms of advocating for implementation partnership could be. So I will turn it over to my colleague, Aisa Conchola, to talk about the state work.
Hi, everyone. So here we wanted to provide a quick update on the state of play around implementation of ESSA across the country. So definitely the ESSA implementation has been moving along. Since April 3rd, which was the spring state plan submission deadline, a total of 16 states and the District of Columbia all submitted their state plans for review. The remaining states are all in the process of creating their draft plans, engaging with stakeholders, getting feedback and consultation in preparation for submitting their state plans by the fall deadline, which is coming up just around the corner on September 18th. As of this week, we have seen the Department of Ed provide final approvals to a total of 6 states. And the 2 most recent states that received approval were the states of Louisiana and the state of Connecticut, which received their final approval on August 15th. Again, so the remaining states that had submitted by the spring deadline are still in the process of what's known as peer review. So going back and forth, answering questions, getting additional feedback from the department, and beginning the process of negotiating towards final approval. We've seen a lot of interest around the feedback process, and we can actually go further into that in the next slide. So this slide here shows kind of a national landscape. The states in blue are the states that have not yet submitted and are planning to submit in the fall deadline. The ones in yellow are the ones that are currently going back and forth with the department through feedback and the peer review process. And the green states are the ones who have just finally submitted for, or finally received final sign-off. So of note, there are 10 states that have received formal feedback from ED asking for more detail. Some of these states, the feedback they received was more specific, was tailored to additional questions on the level of rigor or ambitiousness of their statewide goals. Other feedback included requests for additional rationale on how states came to the, crafted their accountability system and decided which indicators to include. Other feedback included, quite frankly, essentially saying that a state's state plan was just not complete enough to enter into the peer review process and asking for additional information so that the application is more complete. As a result of the extensive back and forth feedback process, there has been a certain amount of pushback, particularly from congressional Republicans in particular, that have had concerns with the level of the level of detail in some of the feedback. And so more recently, ED actually in July changed the way that they are providing initial feedback to states. At the very beginning, a lot of the feedback was done publicly through the form of public letters, and it was all published online. As of July, the department has now started to do initial feedback through phone calls with state representatives, and in an effort to answer initial questions and do some initial back and forth before a lot of the feedback is published publicly. And so with that, and due to a lot of the pushback from congressional representatives, we've now seen that the secretary is getting much more involved in state plan approval and has actually become very involved in the process and is very engaged actually looking through these plans. And so we've seen that, through this process that the department is doing an extensive amount of feedback, but there definitely has been some mixed reviews on how the department is moving forward. So the approval process, it definitely appears to be very compliance oriented. With essentially, we expect some of the state plan approvals coming up in the future to be a little bit more loosely reined in than the initial state plan process that was happening at the beginning. Since the spring deadline, though, it is important to note that while Ed has submitted considerable feedback and formal critiques to states asking for more information and clarity, there has not been any states that have been rejected or had their state plans rejected for not complying with the law thus far. And with that, there has been some mixed reactions within the broader community, the civil rights community and Congress, with members on both sides, on the state of accountability in the state plans submitted thus far, as well as the extent of this feedback. And so, Donica, I didn't know if you wanted to kind of weigh in on some of the mixed responses that we've received from particularly the civil rights community on the state of accountability.
I think it's been a really interesting process for us, and this is more context for when we go to the Hill and how Hill people are thinking about it. When Secretary DeVos came on and this process was in play, people thought, oh, it'll be just rubber stamp whatever the states want, because she's been saying over and over and over, flexibility, 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 state control. The first two states that got public review, Delaware being the very first, was the opposite of that. It was super nitty-gritty detailed comments. In fact, and some of it was compliance, like you need to fill out this question in the form that we asked you, so fair enough. Some of it was in order to comply with the law, this is what you have to do. But where people really started raising their eyebrows was around comments that your goals for achievement for all kids and subgroups is not ambitious enough. Getting to that subjective feedback lit a fire under many sides. So on the civil rights side, they're sort of cheering on Secretary DeVos, saying, wow, great, yes, fight for more ambitious goals. On the more conservative side, particularly Hill Republicans, particularly Senator Alexander, who helped write this law, they said that goes beyond compliance. You are now you are becoming the national school board that I told you this law was not going to have. And putting your thumb too closely into the details of the law, let the states do what they think is ambitious. That created a firestorm that Secretary Voss got slapped down, I'll just be honest, pretty hard. And she now, you see exactly what Aisa said, where she's sort of backpedaling and saying, we're going to give comments so we comply, but we're basically going to let people go. So that's back where we are. And so obviously now the switch has flipped. Civil rights community is now upset and not as happy. And I think everybody's sort of realizing that ship is sailing. And so we need to really focus in on whatever the plans say, which are not always super detailed. We need to work with the states to dig down deep and get detail and get it right. And then obviously pivot to local implementation, which we'll spend some time talking about.
Mm-hmm. And Donica and Aisa, this is such a critical point. I know a lot of folks on the phone and joining us on the 12th and 13th come to the table because they're doing work to serve all students, but many organizations also focus specifically on students with learning and attention issues, on the impacts of trauma. Anything else you'd add specific to those subgroups of students? I know we'll get into this more when we get there, but I think the civil rights community point is so critical and something that I know a lot of folks are eager to hear more about when we get around the same table.
I think the biggest concern that I can think of is as you get into the states where you focus and the districts where you focus, to the extent that those goals are ambitious or not in your mind, are they as ambitious for all students as they are for the high performing or high income students? That inequity is prevalent in some of these plans where it's not as equitable as you'd want. And so to us, it feels like that's a place where on the accountability side, we can really put pressure and pay attention to as it gets implemented. There's no reason a district, even within a state that has minimal goals, a district couldn't say that's not enough for us, we're going to overachieve. We're going to do better, we're going to focus on our lowest performing, we're going to focus on attention issues, whatever. So I think that that's an area that everybody needs to pay attention to, and it's not going to be dictated at this level, at the federal level. Oh, I just want to make one other point that another area where the feedback has been sort of lackluster, and another area we can really think about is innovation. So this hope of change, that we have this opportunity to rewrite how we do education, ESSA left more flexibility. This, in not every state, but in a lot of states, they're just kind of tweaking what they already do. And again, I would say missed opportunity at the state level, but the conversation's not over, because states, again, they weren't detailed. You can push for more change, innovation, and the district level, they have a lot more flexibility, as we've talked about, especially around turnaround, and they can push innovation at every level. The conversation's not over. It is a little disappointing though. States didn't step up as innovation and change oriented as we would have hoped. So that sort of brings us up to date. We sort of talked about, where Reimagine Learning had policy input. What is the state of play right now with the states? So what does this mean to you, and what will we be focusing on going into the meeting? You need, and I've prefaced this a little bit, you and we together need to be thinking about what are the opportunities in the states you want to focus on that are open in the state plans. Because of this September 18th deadline, we are not focused on necessarily changing the plan between September 13th and September 18th. It's pretty much signed and delivered, so we understand that.
That sounds doable.
Yeah. But once these plans are submitted, they have to be implemented at the state level, and there's still so much to figure out. A lot of the plans are very high level, and there's a lot of details to figure out. So what are those opportunities to help states do this right? And where do those state plans align to Reimagine Learning priorities? Where are they focusing on SEL? Where are they focusing on personalized learning? Where are they focused on students with attention and deficit disorders? And how can we dig in and help them? Then the big pivot now is pretty soon states are going to start to say, hey, districts, here's our plan for how we are going to ask you to submit your LEA district level school improvement plans under ESSA. That process should, in most districts, especially larger ones, kick off an engagement process, a planning process, and districts saying, hey, what can we do with this new flexibility? We're going to have the same barriers. Do they want to change anything they're doing? Do they just want to align it to what they're already doing? How can we advocate for better, more, or new partnerships? And then finally, where those districts and states where you're working, thinking about what this new structure is, if changed largely or not, there's some changes no matter what. The accountability system had to change, what states are asking for has changed. Is there any change in how you need to deliver or message your delivery of services to align to that? So the opportunities for us, we're really going to be focusing in September on messaging and how to talk to policymakers. We're going to have a focus on what it is that we want to help you sort of think about what strategies you can undertake in your states and districts to help advocate at that level. And we see some, again, not all, some of these potential opportunities aligned aligned to the fact that we are evidence-based folks. They have to all meet a certain level of evidence-based definition criteria when they implement these programs. We can help them do that. There are these fifth indicators, and whatever that state has identified as these additional indicators, how can we all help them deliver on that if there's alignment to that work? There is new English language proficiency and English learner policy. There's never been an English language proficiency element of the accountability system before. There's going to be new highlighted attention on the needs of English learners. How can we help? Students with disabilities, we've talked about that for a minute, but the notion that we are going to have a different accountability system and all kids have to meet certain goals, but there's going to be these additional indicators and there's going to be a new way of doing business. How do we make sure students with disabilities and attention and deficits or disorders continue to be served well and actually can be accelerated within that process? We mentioned personalized learning, competency-based learning as two levers that are clearly in, and we need to pay attention and leverage those to the extent we can. And then school improvement, where a lot of you play, whether that's on the teacher and school leader development side, whether that's on the trauma and attention, trauma issues, attention deficit disorders, and you're helping with that, whether you're helping with data systems and that can help drive change and help schools understand, whatever it is, the school improvement process is going to be more flexible and you can get in there. And so as we think about the training being about the tools you need to advocate and the tools you need to play in the process at the state and local level, these are the content pieces that you've got to figure out in your organization once you've had a chance to look at the state plans, once we understand what your state process is, that we can start to hang on to make a change. And then I'll just transition to say that when we talk at the meeting, we're going to spend some time helping you think about state and local advocacy and help you understand how people are thinking about ESSA and implementation and hear from some folks who are dealing with that directly. But on the federal side, since ESSA policy is written and these plans are all submitted, the game is really on the budget. And you cannot do the work you do, you cannot partner with districts on the work you do if we don't have federal funding that's supporting all of this. And so we feel like on the federal side, it's really important for Reimagine Learning to engage on funding. And funding is tough right now. And so Aissa's going to tell us a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. And so as Danica said, the budget and the appropriations process, it is definitely a little tough. And it's been underway since earlier this year. So in May, the Trump administration released its very first budget proposal, which essentially set out its funding priorities for FY 2018. The budget proposed significant reductions across the Departments of Education, Labor, Health and Human Services, with many of the significant cuts being targeted at the Department of Education, particularly a $9.2 billion cut compared to FY17 levels, as well as cuts of approximately $12.6 billion at the Department of HHS compared to 17 levels. So in July, on July 19th, the House Labor Appropriations Committee passed its own FY 2018 funding proposal. The bill was largely partisan and passed the committee down a party line vote. And the House is actually expected to consider this funding bill as well as a small package of other funding bills on the House floor in early September. So hopefully we'll have more of an update on those funding bills once we all have you back in DC. And so while this funding bill was largely partisan, it did include a lot of very similar reductions across the Labor HHS portfolio. They were significantly less than the president's budget proposal, but still pretty significant. They included a $2.4 billion cut to the Department of Education. And while this was definitely still a very draconian cut in these proposals, many of the new proposals that were proposed in the president's budget were largely rejected in the House's funding proposal. And that's significant, mostly because we really did expect the House budget funding proposal to be the most partisan, to be the most aligned to the president's budget proposal. And because there were areas where they definitely were far apart, it was very interesting to see, and we'll actually go into further detail in the next slide. And then on the Senate side, the labor appropriations process has been moving a bit slower. Staff is currently in the process of negotiating a bipartisan bill that they actually expect to be bringing up to a vote in the subcommittee and full committee the first week in September. Since we do expect it to be bipartisan, we do expect the cuts to be much smaller than what was present in the president's budget and the House funding bill, but still that text has not been made public, and we'll know more once we get to September.
And to add a few factual pieces to put the context around this, FY18 for federal government starts October 1st, 2017 and ends September 30th, 2018. For Department of Education funding, for the most part, that money, Title I, Title II, the big programs, that is not released to states and districts until July of 2018. So I say that just to help you understand, districts look at what 2018 is to plan their next school year. So the school year that we're talking about is 18-19 for FY18 funding. However, this meeting in September is critically well timed because they are literally talking about the budget right now. They will literally have just maybe finished marking up a committee bill in the Senate that Aisa talked about. And literally they have till September 30th to either come up with a continuing resolution to keep the government running, shut down the government, which is possible, and then also, or create some sort of appropriations deal. And so part of what we're hearing from the Hill staff is that everybody wants every education program funded. Okay, we're going to come under pressure to cut something. Tell us why we shouldn't cut it. Title II, which I still get into, is a good example, where the Title II funding for professional development has been zeroed out in the House. Why? Why does it matter that we support teacher professional development? And they don't want to know teacher professional development is important. They want to know, in Boston, Massachusetts, we spend this money on these things that make this difference in the classroom. That's part of what we're going to be working on as we go into the September meeting. And it is so critical for us to get that story and be part of that effort, because that's what's needed to make this case.
Absolutely. So this next slide that we have here has a budget chart of select programs. There definitely does not include every single education program that was funded through the various funding proposals. However, we did want to include several that fell within several reimagined learning education priorities and a lot of the work that you all do, on the day-to-day level. So here we have the funding level split between the levels of funding that they received in FY18, how the various programs fared under the president's proposed budget, how the program fared within the House funding bill, and then the various differences between the two scenarios. Some important areas to flag, and I had noted it earlier, is where the House funding bill deferred from the president's budget proposal, where they deferred, and also some areas where they aligned, and why that's important. And so a couple of these that I'm going to point out is the Title I. In the Title I program, the president proposed a $1 billion initiative known as the Focus Grant Program, which would have allowed for funding to LEAs to support weighted student funding options, open enrollment systems to essentially allow federal, state, and local funding to follow a student to a public school of their choice. This was very much part of the president's campaign rhetoric around improving and expanding opportunities to improve school choice for students and families. This one initiative was it did not receive any funding in the House funding bill. And it was seen as a very important move that the House funding bill did not support this funding, but it is just really interesting to point out that this was one of the top priorities for the president's budget, and essentially the House funding bill rejected this initiative. Another area that I wanted to point out, which actually is an area where the two proposals aligned, was, and as Donica mentioned, the elimination of the Title IIA Supporting Effective Instruction state grant program. This funding program essentially sends flexible funding to the state and to local districts to support a host of professional development activities. This program was proposed to be eliminated in the president's budget. It was essentially, or it remains proposed as eliminated in the House funding bill. And right now there are tons of folks that are going to the Hill talking about the importance of this program and really trying to put data and numbers behind the actual impact of this program to show its importance. And really focusing on the Senate, which is currently right now trying to negotiate some sort of funding bill to try to save this program in particular. Another program that I know is very important to you all is the School Leader Recruitment and Support Program, which specifically focuses funding to support school leadership activities across the states. This program was also proposed to be eliminated in the president's budget, and it remains eliminated in the House funding proposal as well. So I know I'm talking about some of the ones that definitely remained eliminated across the two proposals, but there were a couple of other ones that were proposed to be eliminated in the president's budget, but received increased funding in the House funding bill, or level funding, which was a huge success in the House funding bill. So a couple of these include the Student Support and Academic Enrichment Block Grant Program, the Title IVA Block Grant Program, which will provide flexible funding to states and local districts to host an array of activities within various buckets, within well-rounded educational opportunities, safe and healthy educational opportunities, and opportunities that help with the effective usage of technology. This program was proposed to be eliminated in the president's budget and actually received, within the House funding bill, would have received $100 million additional in funding from the FY17 levels. This is an example of how it's important to not only engage your congressional members, because there are opportunities where programs can actually see increased funding, even if they were proposed to be eliminated in the president's budget. And then another program to highlight here is the president's budget actually proposed to completely eliminate the Corporation for National and Community Service, which oversees the AmeriCorps program. The House funding bill completely rejected that proposal and actually maintained level funding for both the Corporation for National and Community Service and the National AmeriCorps program as well. And so I know that we just included a budget chart, which kind of provides the number story of the budget, but here we really wanted to hit the point home on how these cuts and how these potential programmatic eliminations can actually impact the work that districts are doing in trying to move forward with ESSA implementation. So for example, or implementation and a lot of the work that you all are doing around Reimagine Learning priorities in particular. So any potential cuts to the Title I program, how can that impact Reimagine Learning priorities? Well, that results in significantly less funding to some of the most under-resourced schools across the country, and therefore making it much more difficult for them to support or prioritize any of the critical turnaround activities that were included within ESSA. And that really cuts off those critical touch points that we have to engage with districts if they just don't have the resources to support these activities and these initiatives. Potential cuts to the Title IV Student Support and Academic Enrichment Program. This grant was established through the consolidation of several other competitive grant programs. So any significant funding cuts to this program will result in significantly less flexible funding to local districts and schools across the country to either pilot or expand some of the RL priorities that fit within the well-rounded educational activities, safe and healthy learning activities, and effective technology initiatives within that program as well. And then Donica kind of mentioned it earlier before, the Title IIA Professional Development Program. So states and LEAs, if that program were to be completely eliminated, states and LEAs would receive significantly less funding to support the variety of statewide and district level professional development programs. How this also ties into state plan implementation process too is there have been certain states that have actually stepped forward and said they really do want to take advantage of the new optional set-asides that states have within the Title II program to support statewide initiatives around school leadership and around teacher preparation academies. If a state designated that set aside and planned on moving forward and this program were to be eliminated, states would receive zero funding to actually support those statewide initiatives. So that has a direct impact on states moving forward and being innovative within the professional development space. And then the last example that we wanted to highlight were potential cuts to the 21st Century Community Learning Centers program, which obviously the RL priorities around partnerships and increasing mentions of strong partnerships in this program. If this program were to be eliminated, that would essentially cut off the funding stream that districts would have to enter into these partnerships and increase innovation in their communities and in their schools through after school and extended learning time opportunities. So these really do have a direct impact on the work that states and districts will be doing to implement some of the new innovation and new flexibility presented in ESSA, and it really is a critical time to engage in this debate.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Danica and Aisa, for the detailed walkthrough. I think that provides a lot of really critical context as we come together on the 12th and 13th. And as folks arrive in DC, we'll also be providing some current state of play updates as we may have additional information in the next couple of days and weeks here. So with that, I would love to turn to a brief overview of the agenda to give folks on the line a sense of what to expect on September 12th and 13th. So we kick off on September 12th at 2 p.m. with a welcome and overview. In your email, you've received information from Molly about logistics, hotel, travel, all of that. Molly is really leading the charge and can field any questions you have around arrivals and venues, and you'll receive this information in detail. From there, we have a speaker who will be joining us. We'll hear from some folks about their perspective, a leader from both the state and district level, which will provide really critical context for the work that we do together on day one. In the afternoon, we'll move into a hands-on working session. We've heard from many organizations that there's strong appetite and interest to figure out exactly what that state and local engagement looks like right now in terms of ESSA implementation. Danica and Aisa provided really critical context around why that work is so important and teed up some of those opportunities for influence. We'll get more into the weeds there. From that, we transition over to a dinner where we will have an opportunity to debrief the day, to talk about the work and the ground that we've covered together, and look ahead to our federal focus day two. We also have the opportunity to have an off-the-record fireside chat with two incredible senior Hill staffers, which will provide some additional context as we head into day two and our group moves up to the Hill. On the 13th, we kick off at 8:30 with an overview of the day. From there, we again roll up our sleeves for a working session specifically oriented towards federal advocacy training. That's a really critical opportunity to bring that pre-work to the table. So just a reminder to folks, you'll see that at the close of the slide deck and in that email, the pre-work is due on September 8th, end of day via email to Molly O'Donnell. From there, after the work session and prep, we will actually travel up to the Hill where we will have an opportunity to put into action the training that we've been in together for throughout the 2 days here, where we'll meet with staffers and speak to some of these critical priorities, both in regards to policy recommendations and the federal budget. Those meetings will be facilitated by members of the America Forward staff and our partners, and then from there we'll wrap up, debrief, and talk about path forward together. So with that, we'd love to preview some of that pre-work, give folks a sense of how that fits into the arc of the 2 days and the schedule. And with that, I think I'll pass it back to Danica and Aisa to talk briefly about anything that they want to flag related to, in particular, the pre-work we're asking folks to do on the communications and storytelling aspect of the day. You'll receive this via email, and if you have any questions, you can definitely get in touch with Molly and our team. I think Aisa and Danica have made a really strong case for why it's so important to lift that local perspective. This document and this pre-work is really essential to preparing you to come into the room, and then subsequently those meetings on the Hill, able to tell a concise and incredibly powerful story about what the on-the-ground impact of your organization looks like. So anything else you'd add?
I think just coming with the mindset that the reason you're doing the homework is some of this you're going to think, oh, I know this. Great, write it down, but have it at the tip of your fingers Some of it you may have to dig in and find out from other folks in your organization or whoever. So it's important to come with this information and do it ahead, because we are going to be engaged in a very fast, throughout the 2 days, fast and interactive process to use this information to hone your skills. We don't want you doing research in the room. We want you honing your skills and interacting with each other. So please just take the time to do this. We promise, and you can trust us, that we'll lead you through a great 2 days interactively.
So with that, we'll turn to some tips for making the most of your time on the Hill. Aisha?
Great. And so as Sarah had mentioned, we will be spending some time meeting with a couple offices on the Hill where you guys will have the opportunity to really showcase what you've learned over the course of the 2 days, and then we'll have the opportunity to communicate some of the data and the research that you were able to compile on your organization's impact and the importance of the federal resources that your organizations rely on, or that districts rely on to partner with your organization. So we've included some 4 helpful tips, and I should specify at first that we will be helping you all with setting up these meetings, so you don't have to worry about that. But these are just things that you can think about, and feel free to keep these tips handy if you want to come up again in the future to meet up with members on the Hill or members in your state legislature. These are helpful to use, as any time that you engage with policymakers. So number 1 is do your research. A lot of this is centered around who you will be specifically meeting with. So do the research on the member, do the research on the district that him or her represents, and check in to see what their legislative interests and legislative priorities are. Do they have any related background or any past work that relates to the Reimagine Learning, the group that you do with Reimagine Learning? Do they serve on any education-related committees, either authorizing or appropriating, which means they craft the policy or they actually fund the programs that go through Congress. And so again, the AF and the New Profit team here will actually gather this information for you, and we will put it together so that you can study it before your meeting, so you don't have to worry about that within the context of September meeting. Number 2, prepare your pitch. This is where a lot of the pre-work will help guide you, but this is where a lot of the work that we'll really rely on you to do beforehand to prepare. So gather the relevant facts and data if available and the stories of impact for your organization. This is going to help you craft your message in your meeting. Make sure to have the numbers on how many students that your program has served within that member's district or within the state that you come from. And what is the different impact levels either in the state level and across the nation? If your organization has a national impact, make sure that you have that information as well as the relevant state-by-state impact that you all have. Number 3 is planning ahead. So organizing yourself and knowing the ask. We, again, will be creating the Reimagine Learning ask for you, and we will have those worksheets where we can go over them and study them before your meeting. So this is definitely something to have kind of to think about ahead of time when you use these. But these asks so one of the most important things to remember about a Hill meeting is knowing your ask and being specific about it. So organizing it and really knowing what you're asking the member to specifically do. Is it to push forward a certain policy change? Is it to ensure funding for a particular program, defending a particular program? Making sure that you know that ahead of time. And then come prepared with your business cards for the follow-up. So as you meet with the member or with the member's staff, you're going to want to make sure that you have business cards available so that the staffer can reach out to you in the future to ask follow-up information so that you guys can keep the dialogue going along even after the meeting finishes.
And just to be very clear on the ask part, we are going to focus our ask, because of the time and the relevance we talked about, on budget asks that relate to programs of relevance for Reimagine Learning. We are going to create that ask that is holistic and can be used in every meeting. You should come thinking about which federal programs, is it Title I or II, or in what ways are individual programs most important to your organization and work, where you can have the most leverage, and that's where your impact stories should be focused.
And here we have a guide that will walk through essentially what we would love for you all to be prepared for with regards to the September meeting. So we, again, are putting a plug-in to please complete your pre-work on your storytelling document. And I know that we will be sending this information out via email so that you guys will have it and have plenty of time to complete. So the pre-work on storytelling, this is going to really give you the template to plug in your data, to plug in the numbers on your national and state impact. And so we will actually have some target lists that we will be sending along that will help you tailor the state-by-state impact information. So here, this is what we will be doing to prepare for the September meeting. We, as in America Forward, New Profit, and the Penn Hill Group. So we will be setting up the meetings on the Hill. We are trying to make sure that we will have time for 2 meetings for each group. So be prepared to bring enough business cards to meet with 2 different congressional offices. We will be providing you background on each member that you will be meeting with, including any Reimagine Learning priorities that they've worked on in the past, so that you are equipped with all the background information that you'll need to go into that meeting well prepared. And then we are also going to be creating a Reimagine Learning ask and associated with the Leave Behind. So these are going to be materials that you're going to be providing to the member of Congress or to his staff, his or her staff, that will have information on the specific Reimagine Learning ask. And then at the meeting, we ask that you just come prepared to dig in and to tell your organization's story. A lot of this will be entailed with filling out your pre-work templates, and then having this, we will be doing exercises that are essentially with the goal that will help you revise or refine and practice your pitch and improve your pitch to the best ability, so that you go into your meetings prepared for success. And then you will also have opportunities to work within your meeting group to practice for your Hill meeting, to practice and essentially designate which individual is going to be responsible for which role at the meeting. So you will definitely have plenty of time to prepare during our workshop.
Great, thanks so much. So with that, a couple of reminders for folks you'll see here on the screen if you're playing along the Zoom recording here. We are offering up 2 office hours. So those are really opportunities to ask any and all questions about the materials you receive, the content covered here in this recording, anything top of mind for you. We would love to help you prepare for September 12th and 13th. Definitely take advantage of this. We have our first office hour on Tuesday, September 5th from 3:30 to 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and the second on Thursday, September 7th from 10 to 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Those are open to anyone that's listening to this recording. No questions too big or too small. You'll have the America Forward and the Penn Hill teams on, ready to answer questions, and that'll be a relatively informal setting. So we really encourage folks to take advantage. The dial-in information is there. You'll also receive in your pre-work email the dial-in information, a link if you want to join online. But again, that's an informal opportunity to ask questions of folks. So with that, I'll turn it kind of once around the table to colleagues to see if anyone wants to offer some closing comments. But I'll just underscore how excited we are to have you all here in September in Washington, D.C. Such an important time to make sure that the folks that are doing incredible work at the community level are on the Hill. And we are excited to review pre-work materials and to welcome you to town. Anything else? Great. Molly, anything else in closing?
No, I think I would just add that I'm really excited to see everyone, and as Sarah and everyone on the phone has shared, please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. If the office hours are exciting to you, you want to learn more, but you're not sure if it's the right thing, please shoot me an email, anything you need in advance of the day, and we're pumped to have you.
Great. Well, thanks so much. And with that, we will see you all in Washington, D.C. on September 12th and 13th. Take care.